You're listening to All Things 3D, where we talk about the world of fabricating, designing, and capturing in the third dimension.
Hola, Miguel.
Hello there.
Something is coming. Something revolutionary.
Keep that audio up.
Unlike anything the world has ever seen before.
What is this Oculus thing?
Sansar.
Sansar.
An entirely new platform that will take the world of virtual reality to the next level.
Okay.
With Sansar's unprecedented technology, everyone can create their own high-quality social VR experiences. No longer is VR limited to just professional developers and engineers. Creators can upload original assets from common 3D formats, repurpose existing content, or get new designs from the ever-expanding Sansar store. Sansar's easy-to-use tools allow users to add lighting, spatial sound, and scripting to bring a true sense of immersion to their creations. With the click of a button, creators can publish their work and then interact with others through detailed avatars. With Sansar, you'll have the power to share your creations with friends, colleagues, customers, or even the entire world. You'll have the power to collaborate with other creators and innovators, to recreate history, to amaze and delight. Sansar is going to change the way we live our virtual lives, from education and commerce to entertainment and live events. The possibilities are limited only by your imagination. Get ready, because the future of 3D creation and interactive social VR is coming. Welcome to Sansar.
Good morning, Chris.
Good
How are
morning.
you?
Wow, that was, it started off and I was a little skeptical. I'm like, I don't know. I don't know. I'm not, I guess it's because I've never really been, except for the old days, I guess, like when we had, what was it called? CompuServe. We used to have this, before we had like the mainstream internet, we had these little internets, right? Remember we had like AOL and CompuServe, and you'd go into the chat rooms and you'd interact with people. But then I never really got into the whole like Second Life. It just didn't feel right to me. But
Well,
I can totally see this being a platform for like teaching, like online curriculum. Hello.
Okay, well, let me go ahead and give a little bit of a rundown, and later on, I'm going to give a little bit of a tutorial if my my VR laptop works out for me. But essentially, I spent the last couple of days actually bringing in the VR bathroom, the small bathroom that I've used in basically all the platforms. But I see this as a huge potential for AEC, as well as any other collaborative feature, because one, the tools are fairly easy to work with. They're a little, in my opinion, cumbersome because I like CAD programs that use the middle mouse button. They don't use that, and you have to use your keyboard. I like to have everything in one hand, and so I'm a little disappointed with that. But other than that, the engine is pretty good. There is some quirks, and that I'll talk about a little bit later, but let's see. If you can see behind me, I've got their actual website up, and as you saw earlier, the video from it. But one of the things that, I spent a little bit of time going into a couple of the different areas. Let's see if I can, let's bring up this one. This one was pretty cool because this is like a museum, and you literally, unlike a museum, since items float in midair without supports, you can walk through and see the full flight. I don't know if you can see it over here on the right-hand side.
Yeah.
But you can walk the whole path between the Earth and the Moon, and it has little things that come up. You can go over to different areas. You can look at the Saturn V from one end to the other. You can look at the service module. You can look at the lunar module as though you were in a museum. And then you can go to these little kiosks and it will talk to you. It's really well done. And it says it's by Loot Interactive. But all these different sites, you can just go out there and try out yourself. There was one for a museum. Let's see if I can find it. I don't know. There's several in here. There are forests, but the thing that really struck me is different than Second Life is the engine is really a fairly decent engine. It uses PBR, which are like environmental textures now, so you can get some really good quality looks and feels. Again, it's a little different than if you're used to Unity 3D or Unreal. You have to do pretty much everything in your 3D CAD or modeling program as far as your textures before importing it. There's very little you can do after the fact, which to me is not a huge problem. And then you import it, and then basically you can bring all these objects together. And as you can see, you can add lighting, and not only standard lighting, but global lighting, and your standard lighting like spotlights and so forth can be added once you bring your device into it. And again, if my laptop works out for me, then we'll be able to actually see that. So I'm trying to look for another one. There's like a standard scene that basically everybody starts out in, that was done by Linden Labs. But look at this Hercules garden. I mean, that's pretty impressive. Notice the glossy, so you can set up speculars, you can set up metallic surfaces in your textures. And then basically, if you go out to their website, you can hit visit. I'll do it here because I haven't loaded it, but it tells me, hey, you have to download their client. It's about a 500, 600 megabyte client, which, as far as clients are concerned, or applications that are 3D, that's not too bad. If you look at some of the games from the Oculus store, they're in the gigabytes, so that's not too bad. Everything streams. When I was first trying it out a few months ago, I felt the performance was really lacking, but in some of the experiences, I guess is what they call them, the different worlds, only had a few people in it, but they come in and you can do a little customization within the application, not very much, but you can also bring in, they don't have an actual animated model yet, but you can build clothes and things like that and then import them to your model, a lot like Second Life. Now, my wife made the comment, because we actually used this when we were doing our video gaming addiction. We actually were in Second Life and created a little funny skit for it. We had our own little characters in Second Life, but Second Life kind of took off as, what do you want to call it, the alternative world for sex, as well as, have you heard of furries? It became an environment where you could be pretty much whatever you wanted, and they set up stores to buy things to be whatever you wanted. Now, I don't know if this is be the direction of this. Hopefully, if it
do they
does,
have a room? Do they have a room for the bronies?
The who's?
The bronies.
What are the bronies?
The bronies are the My Little Pony, the middle-aged men that worship My Little Pony.
Okay, that sounds. I don't. They could.
It's like been a phenomenon for the last couple of years. I think they made a documentary about it. I could just see that taking off on Second Life.
Actually, it probably is. I mean,
Yeah.
like I said, it's a lot of. I hate to use the word deviant behaviors, but essentially anything that's a little unique and unusual, more than likely it was in Second Life.
Just call it fringe.
Fringe, thank you. It's a better, safer word. But the fringe elements were kind of apparent, and there didn't really seem to be any walled garden areas. So if you were new to Second Life, you might wind up there, and even if that isn't your taste, so hopefully they'll be able to isolate that better. Now, some of the things,
you could find Mike and myself on there, after 11 p.m. most nights.
Okay, well let's look at the Sansar store.
So Sansar, all I can think is that without standard aspect ratio, I don't know what Sansar, meaning without, right?
I guess, I don't know.
Yeah.
I didn't put AR. Don't know what that means.
Huh.
Okay, so
this is a store where you can buy things in Sansar currency.
Right.
You can buy elements to dress your thing.
Correct. And what did I come out to? Like 100 or Sansar bucks was like $4 or something like that. I can't remember. It's not. Yeah. So it's pretty. So a lot of this stuff. Well, okay. But a lot of these models, if you wanted to create your own world, you know, like this bridge here is $699. That's a couple of, you know, less than $5. So if you've ever gone out to look at 3D stuff, and I'll bring that up in a moment. What is it?
But you can only use
Turbo
it
Squid?
in this world, right?
Correct. Well, you could probably find exporters to bring it out of it, but regardless, if you're trying to develop a world, you might be getting 3D content from places like Turbo Squid. And if you've ever been out to Turbo Squid, it's pretty expensive. In fact, there's kind of somewhat of a disgruntled reaction, because I guess they teamed up with Sansar in order to provide the ability to bring in models from Turbo Squid. And some people feel that that's catering to the pros and not like in Second Life, which was the hobbyist. And I think, well, that's a possibility, but I would not close the door on maybe some other people. Who knows? Maybe Sketchfab. In fact, what's interesting, maybe Sketchfab might be involved in this. You could download models from Sketchfab. But the import process isn't that difficult, but there are a lot of quirks. And one of the reasons I was kind of standoffish from the application when I first tried it out is that things that would easily import into Unreal or Unity failed immediately in this. Or I brought something in and it didn't show up. And I've learned some reasons why. So the sad thing is you have to kind of tweak your models before importing, and that could be a problem. But if you just wanted to build things based upon what's in their store, and it seems to be growing fairly quickly now that is released into public beta, you'll see more and more objects that you can just basically input, and then it'll show up in your editor, and then you can just drag them around. So I think, and the other cool thing is, like I said, I'll show a little bit later, is that you don't necessarily have to have a headset. You can run it just like Second Life. It's just a better engine. So if you have a decent machine that can run VR or halfway decent graphics, you could run this without a VR headset and just walk around with your keyboard and a mouse. So you don't necessarily have it. Obviously, being immersed in it is a pretty cool factor. You can also create scripts so you can activate things. It uses, what does it use? I want to say CS. Objective C. Is that what I want? No. C#. Sorry. So it uses C# as its scripting tool, and that's the same thing that's used in Unity. So you should be able to cross over fairly quickly to create scripts to make things work and not work. So I think this might take off, especially for the fact is that it's free. And they will basically support themselves through, here we go, here's your Turbo Squid imports, Sansar Studio. So we're now seeing Turbo Squid items in here. But these aren't that expensive from Turbo Squid. So, and I've been through Turbo Squid. If you do any searching in Turbo Squid, they have both high-priced items, but they also have lower-priced items. So I think that's a fairly good marriage. And if you're into creating your own environments, as I said, I could see the potential of this. Once you download the client, you could have, a client across the world look at your object, and as I'll show a little later, once I bring in my unit, the quality was just as good, in fact, in my opinion, as Unity, maybe even a little better. And you immediately have an environment that you can bring people into just by making an experience for people to come in publicly.
Is it cloud-based, or so like if you're in a world, it is?
Yeah.
So it's just using WebGL or something to render it out?
No, you have a client.
Oh, so you do have a, okay.
You have a client, it's about 500, 600 megabyte, and that connects to the cloud. And then it's like any of these type of MMORPGs, where essentially all that you have is the identity of your character, where it's at, maybe some of its actions that are sent to each of the clients that identify where you're at in the environment. And as you saw in the demo, you could actually talk and the lips move. I haven't tried any of that, but it will give some presence, but more importantly, you can have multiple people looking at the same object and talk about it with a headset or something about, well, what do you think of this feature, what of that? And you could literally go through and discuss features without having to be there. And I can just see this being used in in, let's say, a warehouse or a small room where you've got your headset on, you've got somebody in another warehouse in Tokyo, and you're talking about this architectural design using the Sansar platform. So I'm going to, again, like I said, if everything works out, I'll have a better demo a little bit later. So I'm pretty excited about this. And the other thing that we're going to be talking about later today is, can we build a VR backpack for less than an iPhone? And obviously,
right.
I left it open there because some iPhones actually cost about $1,000.
Hey, Mike, your audio went is pretty horrible right now. So you might want to drop out and come back in, and I can start that discussion. I can start that discussion on a VR backpack. Mike's gonna weigh in. He's gonna weigh us in on. He's convinced that he can build this thing, a VR backpack. I'm really excited to see what he comes up with. You know, there are some great VR backpacks out there. And I can talk about that while Mike drops out and comes back in with his audio. Hopefully can fix the audio. Yeah, so MSI has this one called the VR1, right? And so we've all probably heard about it. We've covered it on the show before when they were releasing it. And the base model, the VR backpack that they have is called the VR1. And it's got, you know, not the latest, greatest equipment as of now, but it's got the base model has a GTX 1060, so some real good hardware, and the 7th gen i7. And so the base model has 6 gigs of video memory and then a 256 gig solid state drive. And it's basically this backpack, and it's $1,900 on Newegg. And it's basically like this backpack thing that you can wear for a full-fledged. It's built for VR. And here's some images. If you're following along, you can actually watch what this thing looks like. So it's got, you know, it's got an HDMI port, a display port. It's got a bunch, you know, everything you need to plug in your Oculus or Vive directly in. And then it's also got this, it's got a big old beefy, it's got 2, I think, sections for batteries so that you can hot swap these batteries without taking the thing down.
Chris?
Yeah. Yeah, no, your audio, I think you need to drop out and come back in.
I did.
Oh, no, yeah, your audio's still all garbled.
Okay.
Yeah, so you know, I think this thing so far has had seems to I don't really see many reviews. I haven't actually seen any reviews, and I haven't used this thing myself. And then the kind of the higher end model, let's see how much that one is. Oh, so for a few $100 more, you can get the one with the 1070 and a 512 gig. And I think it's a pretty hot item, but I think it gives you about 90 minutes of gameplay. Let's see, there's a little info card here that can give us the, oh, there's an image down here. I know there's an image. MSI has an image. So let's see what they say on the battery life of this thing. Yeah, 90
How
minutes.
about now, Chris?
Yeah, much better. You're all fixed now. Yeah, so this thing gives you about 90 minutes on the 2 batteries, and you can quickly switch your VR1 battery when running low on juice. So, like, you know, it uses 2 batteries, so you can switch one at a time, and you can charge this thing up without having to take it down. You know, and this will play a role in. We have some news items. We have a really action-packed show, so we should probably move along. But and I want Mike to weigh in on his backpack. But you know, I think he has a plan to cut this price down and make your own. If you make your own, Mike's convinced that you can make this for at least $1,000 cheaper. Isn't that right?
That's correct, Chris. Now, keep in mind that obviously is going to reduce the components, but if you've already got a good machine and you're just looking for something kind of like a VR client, yes, you could drop the price about $1,000. We'll talk about it a little bit later. But I wanted to bring up this other backpack, which just came out. It's about 1,800. It might be 18.99. You can go out to Amazon and order it if you want. There's been a couple of videos on it. Like the unit that you're talking about, essentially it's a unit that fits on your back. You can run 2 batteries in it at the same time. They recommend you only one battery while the other one's charging. It's hot swappable, so that's another cool feature. Zotac has already made smaller machines.
How much does this one run?
About 1,800, 1,899.
Okay, well, that's similar to the base model of the one with the 1060. So that was $1,899 for the MSI version.
Right, but this is
this one looks like it has a little bit. Oh, got it. Okay.
So it's a better performing machine, and the backpack fits into like a clip system.
Looks like a little bit more. It's got 2 HDMI. I would probably go with the Zotac if I had to buy one today.
Yeah.
I would
the only
definitely
thing is the guy was jumping around and the unit kind of slipped off. The back kind of was wobbling there, and then he had a hard time getting out of it. It was kind of an amusing little demo video.
Yeah, I think all of this. Yeah, go ahead, Mike. Sorry.
But I mean, if you don't have a machine and you want the best, but you want to be able to put it on your back, obviously the maneuverability is there. You don't have any cables. But the other thing to keep in mind too with this is that there is going to be wireless units coming out.
Right, and that's really exactly.
But there will be some latencies issues. Some people think that it's not going to be that tremendous. But the other thing is that they will also have a battery, because the headsets require power. And how are you going to support power to it when you don't have the umbilical cord? And so you will have an extra battery unit. Some have thought about just creating essentially a battery that fits on the back of the head strap. I like the idea of basically keeping what's on my head light and then supporting it through a belt system. So hopefully some of these people will move in that direction. And then you could like run 2 batteries at a time.
Well, I think the other thing is if the rendering, if the actual processing is either done on the cloud, my thought is I have a couple thoughts on this. So like, you know, Intel has their Y gig that they are releasing. They made that announcement I don't know, what was it, a couple of weeks ago with HTC 5. Intel announced they're partnering with HTC to make this wireless thing, and I'm sure Oculus isn't far behind. You know, the wireless tether obviously is what everybody wants. But I mean, it's not like you can easily watch 2 hours of content on your phone, and to add the VR to the content, really what eats up the battery, I think, is the processing power required for VR. But if the crunching was done either on the cloud or a remote computer that you were wirelessly connected to, as long as you could get that latency down, then I don't think you'd have a power issue, because you'd essentially just have a wireless display, right?
Well, which requires a battery and actually the display, plus you have an IMU, and plus you have the wireless unit itself.
But there's not many times like that I've ever, I mean, VR, I've never played more than an hour straight ever in VR. No, it's just too much. Even 15 minutes, you need a break after 15 minutes.
Yeah, there are some issues with it. The other thing to keep in mind as well is that I'm going to try something here. Hang on.
Yeah, like 15, 20 minutes is about what I want to at any one block of time. That's basically my VR attention span. And after that, I'm either motion sick or I feel disoriented because I'm in a space and I'm on the other side of the room of where I thought I was, or, you know, there's still a little bit of the, you know, there's still some things that I think they could definitely improve, like spatial awareness of where you are in your room. I think that the Guardian system in Oculus has gotten better. I myself would love to have basically a front-facing camera where you could adjust a dial on the side so that even if it was like so it basically looked like 5% opacity, so you could still kind of see, as if you had really dark sunglasses on, you could still kind of see what the room is going on, and then you're mostly, if you focus on the game, you could really see that. I could see something like that, a system like that being really cool. But what do I know?
Well, it just kind of breaks the immersion. Then the whole point is you need a large area to work in. So if you've got a 10 by 10 area you're using for VR, you need a 20 by 20 room to give yourself plenty of room, or just use like thick pads on your wall, make a rubber room, and that way if you hit the wall, it won't hurt.
My idea of this whole, like, it would be a little wheel on the side of your unit, right? That's basically like a volume knob. You have a volume knob on one side, let's say, and then another knob that basically adjusts it. So you could go full immersion, like when you want to watch a movie, or if you wanted to really get into your game. But if you were playing a casual game, like what's the one where you're the little guy, you're running around, one of the first Oculus games, like it looks like Tails. He's like a little raccoon guy. I can't remember his name. Lucky. Yeah, Lucky's Tale. When you're watching Lucky's Tale, when you're playing Lucky's Tale, it's like you're immersed, but it's no more immersed than a 3D. And even if it was just outside of a, like it only dimmed outside the outside view, so you could at least see that you're not stumbling over your furniture in your living room or whatever. And that would all be adjusted. You could just adjust it on a dial. There's just a front-facing camera that can kind of see what's going on. So you could, like, real quick turn that without having to take the whole unit off. I think that would be a nice feature. And I haven't seen anybody really doing that yet, except for with the augmented reality version kind of thing, where you're either you're trying to interact fully, like with your what's the one that you've been working with, the guys from Silicon Valley? Occipital, that kind of thing, where it's an actual augmented reality. I'd like to see kind of the bridge between both, where you have your virtual reality, but you've also got a front-facing camera that you can kind of dim in and out of.
Yeah, as they call it, mixed reality.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah. But if the HTC Vive actually does have a video camera in it. It's monoscopic, so you lose some of the depth information. And one of the things that we did with Occipital when we created some of our early demos is that if you got too close to an object, the video camera would just come on. And then you would see the wall you're about to run into. And I did a couple things like added a little klaxon sound and actually tinted the background red, so that way you knew that you were getting close to a wall. Right. So the same things could be done. Obviously, without having a camera in it, it makes it a little difficult, but the HTC Vive does have one. It's not being used. I guess the real reason for not doing that is because you don't want to break the immersion. But, I mean, like you said, if you had it just come on when you're really close, or let's say maybe 20% within your perimeter, so that way you knew that you're going to run into something. But I've run in the same issue, and I found the real solution is just to have a large damn space. So dedicate a room. So you just need to get a bigger apartment or something that has just a room for it.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's move into our first item. Here's kind of an update as well, besides the Sansar that, I talked about that earlier in the year. It's come a long ways, and we'll talk a little bit more later on. But Ultimaker, remember last week, didn't we talk about Simple?
They're rolling them out fast, that's all I can say.
Cura 2.7 beta is now up, probably because Simplify 3D released their version 4. And it has some cool features. Now, you used both, correct? Or is it just Simplified 3D?
No, I definitely use both. Simplify 3D I use for kind of like the jobs that I want to really get in and tweak. They're for short run productions that I really, if I'm doing a few thousand units and I really, really want to get in and make sure those supports are exactly where I want them. And some of the features that Simplified 3D gets you in. On Cura, though, has been the game because they are out for an out-of-the-box quick print kind of regular production, prototyping, or short productions. Cura is definitely the go-to. It's so fast. You can actually, one of the features I really love that they've rolled in rather recently is you can turn off the auto slicing feature. So you can actually, that's how Simplify 3D is the same thing. So you don't actually slice the model until you're oriented exactly the way you want. So you can really get in, and then when you hit prepare, Cura is the king of speed. So as far as the slicers out there, and I know Slicer, the product Slicer, the Prusa edition slicer, that performance-wise is also pretty reputable. Also on this note, that Ultimaker has their beta of 2.7. Lulzbot has also released a beta version of the 2.6 for Lulzbot edition of Cura. So now we're moving from the Cura version 1 that we've been using on Lulzbot printers, the Lulzbot edition Cura 1. I think was based on 1.6. Now we're rolling up to and we're playing catch up with the Ultimaker boys. So yeah.
Okay, well, on that note, let's kind of go through some of the features that supposedly will be available. Now, keep in mind this is beta, so it's not. There might still be some issues if you plan to do it. But one of the things that I think is kind of neat is the top surface skin. One of the things that I have found is sometimes your top layers need to really be done a little differently in order to provide a little bit better appearance, and they're now providing that. So you're having more control over the layers now that you didn't have in the past. The other thing is printing thin walls. They say this is an experimental feature, 2 times smaller than a nozzle size. This is something you saw in Simplified 3D as well. And there they show it thicker here, and then it becomes thinner. And I'm just going to run through these, and anytime that how about I finish through this, and then you can tell me what good would they be? I mean, obviously, I haven't been doing this for a while, but a lot of things that I see here, I said, gosh, I wish I had that a couple of years ago. Gradual support infill. This, to me, and we also saw this in Simplify 3D, is extremely important because a lot of times you get infill, it's just this same pattern and just waste material and time. And the fact is that you can modify that now, I think is excellent. And there they show this gradual support infill. And then support infill thickness. Obviously, you can modify how thick the infill is, which here they show infill layer thickness. Maybe you can tell me what they're trying to denote there. And then relative Z-seam. Maybe we can talk about that. And then obviously a few other things. You can assign an extruder to print outer walls, and an extruder to inner walls, which we've kind of talked about before. That helps determine the actual material being used. And then
I could see some applications. You know, I could see maybe like a rubberized box, let's say. So like if you wanted to have basically a nylon box that's covered in a skin of NinjaFlex, so it's like impact resistant, but it's also very rigid on the inside, that something like this would be incredibly awesome. Or, you know, you use some sort of cheap material, like a really cheap PLA to make the interior, and then you use like a more expensive carbon fiber nylon on the outside. You know, those are just some. But one of the things I really love about Cura is they're not afraid to kind of put in these like kind of experimental, wild idea. They're just constantly pushing the envelope, pushing the envelope. In fact, I put one thing on the. I submitted an issue a couple weeks ago for an idea I had onto their GitHub, you know, and they're always watching this list, and they're implementing a lot of the ideas that are coming in from all kinds of random people like me. And they got back to me. They're like, yeah, this is a great idea, but we're already doing it a different way. My idea was to build actually, it wasn't my idea, it was my buddy's idea while he was here, would be to build, so like their whole thing is, they had a new feature last week, was it? When 2.6 was announced, that was basically like it builds that sacrificial part to switch between colors or something like that. It's kind of like this. It's basically like a prime tower, if you will. So my idea was to build that prime tower as you could upload your own custom STL. So that instead of the prime tower just being a box, it could be a model that you want to build. So you're not wasting, you know, maybe your clean model needs to be, the color changes need to be right where they need to be, but on the prime tower you could make it whatever, you know, it could be multicolor and at least you'd have a usable model instead of just a wasted big block. And they said, oh, well, we're already working on making the interior of the part, the white tower, or the color change tower. And like, they're like, well, so I think that'll work better. And I was like, well, yeah, that makes more sense. So cool. They're very open to listening to new ideas, and like, even that it requires a lot of effort on their part to like implement these things. So yeah, I really like some of these new features. Can't wait to kind of like play around with them.
Yeah. So one of the things that I noticed is that you can pause and resume temperature, and I have to totally agree with this one. How many times have you had to pause and it's still, the nozzle's completely hot? Now, the only thing that I could see being an issue here is that you have to bring the temp, well, it does identify that. You don't start actually moving the nozzle until you resume standard printing temperature. So that could be kind of a neat feature. What is this relative seam? Z-seam? What seam? Jeez.
Yeah, so relative seam, so like the Z-seam is when before the nozzle, you know, goes to the next layer, when it retracts, you still, a lot of times, even if your retraction's dead on your machine, you'll see, like on these cylinders, for instance, that Mike has pulled up, you'll see that seam where the machine, it basically is starting and stopping that layer and moving on to the next. And so some machines call it bypass seam placement method. So like you can actually enable this bypass of the seam placement so that it randomizes the pattern of where the machine starts and stops and puts that seam so that it looks more broken up, or you can't exactly tell where the seam is. So that could be useful if you like have a cam that needs to have like it needs to be more smooth, so it doesn't like that cam operates more fluidly. But on this one, there's this relative Z-seam. So what happens is if you rotate the model using the rotate tool, it'll keep that seam relative orientation. So you can actually adjust where that seam is.
Okay. Pretty cool. Well, yeah. Obviously, there's a ton of new features here. The best thing to do is just download it and try it out.
Yeah.
Obviously,
yeah, and I'm sure they're gonna experiment. And these are like actually probably really useful from like the other thing I really love about Ultimaker is, you know, on their machines, their profiles and everything just out of the box just like work perfectly with their Ultimaker materials and all that. So I'm sure a lot of these are like kind of either requests or experiments that they're working on in-house to make their materials work even better.
Oh, here's kind of a neat feature. You can bring in SLD prints, and they'll convert them automatically STLs.
Huh.
So, and then obviously
files. It'll ingest SolidWorks files. That's pretty amazing.
So there's new third-party printer support. So if you don't have an Ultimaker, obviously you can use the Cura, and it's always been the case. But obviously there's more support out of the box. So pretty cool. So let's move on to our next item. Chris, do you have something, or should I just go right into, actually, I guess I could look.
Yeah. But, silicone comes to 3D additive fabrication you're going to tell us about.
Yeah. You know, this is something, because obviously with my headset, one of the, what would you call it? The main features that I've wanted to move forward with my headset is the ability to the eye cups themselves be out of a material that's not irritating. Not that I have sensitive skin, but some of these things that I've used can be irritating after a few minutes, let's say a half hour. And silicone is one of the best, in my opinion, of what do they call it, allergenic materials. But in order to create silicone products like these eye cups, you normally have to go to injection molding. So I thought this was kind of cool that we now may be able to print using silicone through an extrusion-based system. And so obviously that's kind of experimental right now, but we'll have to see later on what else comes out of here. But it's a elastomer material that you can 3D print. I don't know if it will require a special printer. It says that each of the layers have to be cured through UV. But this could be interesting if something like this could be supported with, let's say, an external UV that gets switched on and off through a standard extrusion system. You know, I don't know. I think that's pretty cool. Or even if a particular world's first silicone 3D printer. So let's see where that takes us out. So essentially 3D fabrication additive that allows you to use silicone. So I thought that was kind of neat. Obviously, you require a printer that supports the ability to cure silicone as the layers are being created. And there they show it. The other alternative, and I have tinkered with that, is you just create a mold using ABS or even PLA. And then you pour your silicone into it, cure it with UV, and then work with it. But being able to go directly, I think, is kind of a neat process. And the sad thing is most of the additive materials that I have worked with, and some of them I've gotten from you, the Ninja Flex isn't, I mean, it's flexible, but it's not soft. And when you create flexible material like these eye cups, they're still somewhat irritating. And I've had to put a little bit of layer of neoprene cushion in order to, on the edges, but they're still a little more less
Stiff.
Pliable. They're stiff.
Yeah, they are.
So
yeah.
I'm going to be working with Proto Labs with another prototype before I actually get a mold made. But in my particular product, it's very important that they're based out of silicone. I have tried some rubber from another company, and after a while, it just seems, I don't know, just irritating. And
yeah,
that silicone.
Yeah. One of the ones I have clients, you know, that definitely do over molding, and they do all kinds of stuff. And again, and I know we've talked about it, but one of the things that they do is they'll 3D print the master, a cast master, and then they'll make a silicone mold. So they'll make a master mold, and then they can just pour real easily with a 2-part silicone. You know, and they can basically duplicate very inexpensively however many copies they need. So obviously the model has to be somewhat prepared for molding, and then you have to prepare a mold, which isn't always super easy. But then once you have that mold made, you can just make as many as you want. And usually I think the cure time on a lot of these like Reynolds products are like 20 minutes. Right. So pretty much every 20 minutes you can make one on one of those molds, and you know, you can fairly inexpensively just 3D print the master, the cast master. And then I have other clients that have actually 3D printed the master mold itself, and then they just take a caulking gun full of either silicone or whatever. So that's another route, because sometimes getting these printed on some of these other machines, like especially like resin-based machines, you know, I know there's a flexible material I have for the Form Labs, but you know, the biocompatibility of resins is a little questionable. You can develop allergies to it. We've talked about the material data safety sheets, like, doesn't recommend having skin contact. So even after they're cured, and then the shelf life of UV cured resins is about a year-ish before the geometry really starts to warp. I mean, the resins are getting better, and I think the longevity of the parts is getting better, but it's never going to be as good as like a 2-part silicone that you mix from an A and B. You know, at least it's not yet. It might be someday.
Yep. Well, obviously that's a direction, getting some more pliable materials, which has its own problems, but obviously curing it afterwards seems kind of neat. Well, we'll see where that goes. But currently, as you said, you could either make your own molds or create a mold from the positive, which I've done with candies. That works pretty well. But the problem when you have something thin like my little visor, uh, you need to inject it because gravity doesn't allow it to fill the crevices as well. So, and I don't know, it's all kind of an expensive process once you actually start developing devices. Okay, so let's move on into the next thing. And we've covered a product earlier. And in fact, I'm going to go ahead and jump to their website, Gravity Sketch. We covered briefly their mobile unit when it was in beta, and you can get it now for the iPad. You remember this program, Chris?
Yeah, yeah, we did cover this thing, huh?
Yeah, but they've now moved on and created a VR version of it that you can download. It is in beta. It is free. And what it does is it provides some pretty interesting CAD tools. And I'm going to, a little sluggish on my website, but there's some Sketchfab actually can launch or upload directly in the Sketchfab. So I'm going to play a little video that I created. It's not very good, but it'll give you an idea of how this thing works. You ready?
Okay.
All right, so here we are back again, Chris. Now I'm in Gravity Sketch, and we covered this from the iPad perspective some time ago. This is more of an actually modeling program, and this can bring in OBJ files. That's the only thing, but it can export in OBJ, soon to be FBX, as well as IGES files, so that you can bring them into your CAD applications. So again, you have two menu systems here, or I'm sorry, two hand controllers. On the right hand side is the actual manipulator, and we can change the sphere of what do you want to call it, contact. And then as you can see, there's a red button there, and then a blue button. The blue button gives you your menu item, and this is the import feature that I was talking about, or I'm sorry, the export, and then your options, IGES, coming soon, which is FBX, and also coming soon. So right now you can send it as OBJ, and you can also import OBJ, which I can do here. And I'm going to go ahead and bring one in that I actually will show a little bit later using Sansar. But that's my small bathroom. And I will be able to bring it in. It's importing it right now. All these items are in the cloud. All right, so there it is. So I can grab, and then I can grab. There we go. And then by using not the upper trigger, but the lower trigger. And then I can drop it in space, and then I can bring it closer. Let's change my sphere there to me. And by manipulating, let's see if I can turn that on. I can also, by expanding it with 2, which is kind of intuitive. That's why I was confused in Google Block, because it allows me to expand it, and then I can rotate it by grabbing one side of it. I didn't know. And then I can look inside of it. So, there we go. Yeah, since I recorded this earlier, it's really kind of fun. And you feel like you're there, so you're manipulating a model. So there it is. So actually the left one is for orientation. The right one can grab it and move it around.
Huh.
Again, they both have spheres that you can move it. So as you can see, I can spin it around. Kind of swing it around. But I could expand that out to full size. So you could literally stand in it. So I'm going to bring in some other characters. So we'll bring in a mannequin. I am.
Okay.
I'm recording some footage. Yes. That's okay. There. So I put a little man in there, and I'm almost done. But thank you for interrupting me. Well, I'll talk over myself. So essentially, I started having some problems because I put this inside of another layer.
Okay.
And so I can't grab my object. Well, that I finally do. But then I can't expand it because it expands the whole. So I wanted to make him larger. So I finally, I don't yeah, so as you can see, I finally figured out how to make him larger, but because he was still inside the other object, I couldn't do one. So I think I just undid the whole thing and then brought the object outside the model, then expanded, then put it back in. But again, I'm just a novice, so if you spend some time with it, you probably could work with it. So I found that it was pretty intuitive. We're going to talk about another product called Google Blocks a little later, and I did a demo there as well. As you can see, I'm still struggling to try and get that thing to expand. But you have some really cool features, and I'll jump to it here, actually. There, see, I bring it outside. Now I zoom it up, and now I can put it back in. So you could use it, as I showed there, to show examples while you're in VR space. It'd be kind of neat if you had a spectator so you could join me, or we could both work on a model together. That would be kind of cool. Maybe that'll be coming. But you can bring a reference image in and actually build from the reference image. There are some features there. You can turn mirroring on, which is actually very useful if you're mirroring a design from one. But one of the features that I thought, the ink tool I thought was painting, but it's not. But this is the feature that I thought was cool. Let's see. Is creating layer, or like, what would you call it? Sheets, but they're somewhat organic. As you can see, I can actually twist it. And then once I get it set up, I can take that and then extrude it out and make a shape with it. As you can see there, now I don't show any shadowing, but that's kind of like a round shape. Now imagine being able to use those tools around a mannequin or something like that to build clothing. So I thought that was pretty cool. So like I said, it's available for free, and you can use it both on the HTC Vive or the Oculus. And yeah, it's a pretty cool tool if you haven't tried it before. And here, obviously, are some people with much more proficient than I. I thought this was kind of cool. And then you can export directly up to Sketchfab, or you can export as an OBJ or an IGES file. And then, like I said, it will be an FBX export soon. So that's, I mean, this is what somebody designed it. Pretty good.
Jeez.
Yeah. So, and then here.
Wow, there's some talented people, that's for sure.
Very, very talented people. And here's some examples up here. Somebody designing some glasses. And the mannequin head is available as well as the full body. So, I mean, you could literally use this. In fact, I plan to bring in my headset and maybe design a more organic form-fitting visor. So I mean, I'll tinker with it. And the fact is it can export as an, no, you can't. Can you export as an IGS? Or was it import? No, you can export as an IGES. So you can bring it back in to your CAD application. So I'm going to play with it a little bit more, but I thought that was pretty cool. So like I said, it's free right now. And I think if you have it here, in fact, you can go out. Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize. It is not free right now. It is on special. You can get a free, what they call a basic version for a one-time price of $25.49, but if you go out through their website, it's only $24.99, so you can save a few pennies. Or you can get the pro version, which I did right now just to tinker with it, which gives you some of those other export features. And right now it's $25.49 for the first month and then $30 thereafter. So obviously it gives you time to think about if this is something you want to continue to subscribe to. And then there is obviously a studio version for even more money. And then I guess, so I apologize, it is not free, but for, $25.49 to play around with, I don't think that's bad. And especially if you can use some of the cooler tools. I still think the tools are somewhat basic if you compare it to Fusion 360 or even, what's the program that you use? Onshape. It doesn't compare to those. So you might want to try it out first, or maybe not, just look at some other stuff. But here's the mirror feature. But the fact that you can do things in 3D and it appears like it's there, I think is a really cool feature. Okay, so let's move on to the next item. Chris, what do you got?
Yeah, so I've got, this is pretty cool, also a Cura update or a Ultimaker update. This is called 3D hatching, grayscale printing on the Ultimaker 3. This is written by Matt Janney, and I think he's part of the Ultimaker clan. And this is in collaboration with Delft University of Technology, and they've developed a technique to achieve grayscale printing using the Ultimaker 3. And it basically is halftoning 3D prints, and it gives the illusion that these things are printed in, you know, halftone essentially, but it's actually just kind of like a using solid lines of black and white, and it's achieving grayscale like printing. And it's not actual grayscale, it's actually using the technique called hatching, which is developed, I mean, you can see these things from 1600s. That's how they make our dollar bills look the way they do. They make them look like they're halftone, but they're not actual halftones, because halftones are like varying dot sizes. And this is actually just like solid lines. And you can see some of their prints here that they're starting to work on, and they're going to try to roll this in to a future version of Cura. But right now it's just experimental, and they're kind of doing it on their own. And so here's, I mean, look at these models. They're insane looking at the bust of Tim Cooper's. Looks pretty amazing, and so does this little Rhino model. And you can actually download a print-ready model for the Ultimaker 3 that's ready for PLA, black and white. And you can download this model ready to go on ultimaker.com, and you just type in 3D hatching is what you're looking for. There's a link to the model in the show notes as well.
Very, very cool. Yeah, and you obviously can change the blackout for another color. And
right. Yeah. Yeah. It's, I mean,
halftone,
it's very experimental, like bleeding edge. That's what we do here at All Things 3D, bringing you the latest, greatest.
That's true. Yeah. In fact, I've shed some blood from this. Okay, so speaking of blood, or maybe not thereof, 3D in medicine coming up. And actually, I wanted to go with something here that I thought was pretty cool. 3D printer aids Goldsboro man's life-changing surgery. But I thought what was really interesting that this was done through somebody who was going to the East Carolina University during his summer break decided to do this. And essentially an individual, I don't want to get it wrong, basically went in. He has, you can read it there. So he obviously suffered chronic pain. And where was it? It was in here somewhere. Jeez. I hate it when they don't show it right away. There we go. I guess he had multiple scoliosis, and because of the curvature of his spine, it was causing more and more pain. And one of the procedures he had done was to remove ribs, but then he didn't have the structural strength, and a particular rib kept cracking. So imagine the pain this guy was in. So he worked in collaboration. They did some MRIs, and this guy during his summer was able to isolate and fabricate a structure so that they could go back in, and here's a life-size lime green fluorescent orange models made out of ABS plastic. And we talk about, as we know, same material as Legos. But they were able to use that to determine exactly what needs to be placed in there, a titanium mesh, in order to make that's been shaped using the 3D model, in order to provide proper structural strength to prevent his ribs from cracking. And it's been 4 months since the surgery, and his quality of life is much improved. So again, it seems like it's old news that we hear this, but this is public radio that talks about it. But essentially, another individual, because they took the time to take the scans, create a 3D model from it, they were able to shape a titanium mesh for a guy that they pretty much wrote him off, who now has a better quality of life. So another opportunity for 3D fabrication. And the thing is, these 3D prints aren't done with these huge, elaborate, exotic 3D printers. A lot of them are done, like we talked about in the last show, these $300 or $5,000 printers you can buy off the shelf in order to create these products. Now, of course, the exotic titanium used that they shaped based upon the model is a little more different, but we're actually starting to see titanium techniques that you can send models out to and get models immediately printed in titanium or other metals using, now I can't think of it now. You can tell me. What's the technique, Chris?
Are you talking about photogrammetry?
No, I'm talking about printing in metals.
Yeah, DMLS, direct
Yes.
metal laser sintering.
Sintering, depositing materials. And we talked about this, guys, remember back in 2013 when our friend Elon was one of the first to use this to create rocket parts. In fact, one of the rocket engines, you remember. So, and we're actually seeing it more and more in medical as well. Obviously, that wasn't the case here, wasn't needed, but they were able to shape the titanium around the 3D printed frame in ABS.
Right.
So another cool feature of 3D medicine. And I mean, obviously, there's more and more stories coming out. And not only this, but the organic side of it, fabricating using collagen in order to create structures to grow
Ribs.
grids and cells. Well, but actually tissue. So burn victims are now being able to grow tissue on scaffolding based upon their own collagen, so that they don't have problems with rejection. So, I mean, we're starting to see all kinds of cool things if the world survives its heat issues, but that's another problem. Maybe 3D fabrication will solve that one too. Okay, so let's move on into Scanner Darkly.
We'll have to print islands. We'll have to 3D print islands in the habitable zone of Earth.
Yeah, these huge platforms for oil, but they'll just be large 3D fabricators.
Yeah, and we'll harvest the Great Pacific Garbage Patch and we'll recycle it and build islands.
Okay, here's another item.
Okay.
This is in our 3D scanning. Shining 3D, we've talked about them. You know, we saw them for the first time back in 2015 when they were at CES.
Definitely.
And in fact, I saw them in person, and they've come a long way. They've done a lot to support the use of open source models from museums by loaning out their scanners. They've got they have a scanner about the quality of a art tech for about 1/10 the cost. So they've come a long way, and now they've kind of pushed themselves in the dentistry market. So they have this 3D scanning system here that you put, it appears either a mold or a product that was developed, and then you scan it, and then from there you can obviously create products from it. So I've actually worked, if you remember, Dan Kopp had a 3D scanner that you put in your mouth. Here it appears that you make impressions or positives and you just scan those, from what I can understand from this article here. It's lightweight and allows you to provide scans that can be used for other things.
Wow.
So here, triple tray impression scanning, texture scanning, and allows dental professionals to cut back on the time offering optimal data post-processing.
God, I can't wait until you can go in there and not get x-rayed.
Get what? Sorry.
Where you can use this instead of an x-ray. I can't wait. The x-ray always creeps me out at the dentist because, you know, they're like, oh, it's completely safe. Let's just put this big, thick lead bib and I'll be in the other room. But don't worry. We only have this thing pointed at your neck and your thyroid. Like,
well, yes. And we've talked about that on several shows. We've had, let's see, what was his name?
Not Clios, but
yes, Clios.
yeah.
The radiologists on. Yeah, I mean, obviously, if you don't go in daily to get X-rays, you're within limits. I'm more concerned about people who get constant CTs. Obviously, MRIs are safer. The problem is, in order to see the internalized structure of a tooth or your bone structure, CT or X-rays are the only process, unless we can come up with something different to do that.
Well, they also, I mean, they used to say a lot of things were safe, you know.
I'm not disagreeing with that, Chris.
Yeah.
But the other thing, as we talked about, X-ray machines, more modern ones, use 1/10 or less of the power, the energy of previous ones. So what you're being dosed with isn't like the old days. I'm more concerned of what's happened to me based upon stuff that I was exposed to, foods that I was exposed to when they didn't know anything.
Yeah.
Luckily today we have a lot more knowledge, and if we still want to, and I'm frozen.
You're frozen?
Yeah, I was. Wow, I don't know why my performance is so poor.
Yeah, well, I mean, and we're only starting to see the implications of the phone, right? I mean, we know there's tons of peer-reviewed science even on NIH that you know, the electromagnetic radiation even from your phone actually damages mitochondria. At the mitochondria level in your body. They're saying you shouldn't even be holding this thing in your hand now, let alone against your head. And so, I mean, we're just starting to see, just like with X-rays, the implications of the phones and all the electronic interference, the Wi-Fi. They've done all these studies now with the plants. They'll put the plant, MIT's been studying that. Have you seen that? They put the plants, household plants, next to a Wi-Fi router, and they don't grow as well as they should. They don't grow as well as a control, which is like, you know, will thrive in a normal condition, and then they'll put it right next to a Wi-Fi because it's actually damaging the DNA, you know, at a mitochondrial level, they think. So, you know, again, I'm more a fan of something with way less radiation, like a photogrammetry device where they can actually take a 3D scan of your mouth and not have to take an X-ray and wear a lead tip and all that. Yeah, we could rant on about this all day. So I wanted to talk about, on the 3D scanning side, you know, we always talk about Sketchfab. You know, we've had them on the show, and we've talked about them a lot. I know you share a lot of models on Sketchfab. There's a new kid on the block, so I wanted to cover them. And it's called Artis, ARTIS, Graphic Laboratory. So it's ArtisGL.com. And they actually have a Windows upload publisher that you can publish your 3D models. And I noticed they have a little bit different platform, and I noticed the quality of the models is actually really, really, really good. Some of the models that they have scans of are just really good. This is apparently a scan of a car. And one of the things I like is how well they did I noticed they basically have like a map of the scan, and then they kind of place it in a, you know, a stereoscopic environment, or a photographic environment. But it looks really good. They have some really good models.
Now, ArtisGL, don't they make photogrammetry software?
I think they do. And I don't know too much about them. I just know I hadn't seen this ArtisGL place where you could upload, and they have a free download of the Windows version. It's Windows 10 only at this point, which is kind of a bummer. But you can publish your 3D models up, and then anybody can view them using their WebGL platform. So this is like an OpenGL render. And so they've got all kinds of like models you can check out. So it's just another alternative. You know, I like to have like pressure on the heels of all of these things, because I think competition just moves things forward. And they've got some really nice models on here. So I think they're just working on like maybe creating models. Here's a model on the water. I think it looks pretty good. I know it looks really good for being rendered in the on the internet. You know what I mean? Or basically
Mhm.
embedded in the internet. Something you can embed. They actually have embed code. You have to log in. You have to join and log in to get the embed code and stuff. So it's a little different and maybe not quite as polished yet as Sketchfab, but they're a new kid on the block. I figured they were worth a mention.
I appreciate it too. Okay, let's move into my items. We'll get through this quickly, and then obviously we'll let you speak. But I don't. Where's your print whisperer, buddy?
I don't know. I haven't made an appearance in a few weeks. Maybe next week I'll have a tip.
You said that last week.
Oh, well, I didn't. Yeah.
Okay, so let's move on to this Snapdragon. I'm going to talk about it first while you're still on the screen. You know, I've been looking for the Snapdragon. Actually, maybe I can show their previous version before showing this. I actually thought that this was going to be a cool little product. Yeah, let's see if this can. I know that their previous version looked pretty neat, but God, not only is this thing ugly, but it's also expensive. So Qualcomm is going to be releasing a headset based on the Snapdragon 835. Supposedly there's going to be a Dream or a Daydream version, a standalone headset from Google based on the 835. So I wanted to get into this sooner than later from a development perspective. So now I'll jump to it. So this was the previous version, which was based on the Snapdragon 820. And, you know, it didn't look too bad. It seemed pretty slim, right? I mean, not too bad. Yes? What do you think, Chris?
I don't know. It's hard to say without having the thing on my head.
Okay.
I think it looks great, and if it's wireless, then yeah. I mean, but
well,
again,
not only is it wireless, I mean, it's fully mobile. Everything is built in
right.
the headset. The two cameras are here to provide the 6 degrees of positional.
I like the idea of the Pixel or the iPhone being able to pop in the unit really easily, though, because you already buy this thing, right? You're already using this. It's already in your pocket every day. It's a very polished product. It's gone through, you know, the iPhone 7 now is on what? It's like 15th iteration, right? Because they have the S's now and the pluses and all these things. So like, you know, you're on your like 15th iteration already of a product, and everything that you need to be VR is right in this thing. All they need to do is put a little bit higher quality display on them, right? They need to put these maybe 6K, 8K displays on them, and then it's just pop it in the thing. It's already got the accelerometer and the gyro and the magneto and everything it needs to be a VR device. I don't know why we need to pay for another screen and another battery and another service plan. Let's not even go there. Another A9 processor, another motherboard. You got to buy all that stuff again if you have to buy one of these.
Well, let's talk about this unit. First of all, having a 4K or higher screen, I don't see that happening anytime soon in a mobile device unless you do some hardware upscaling, because the processors aren't there. In fact, they can hardly keep up with it. But getting to the Snapdragon developer kit, I thought this would be kind of cool, and would be something at least to get my feet wet with. It had to have the Snapdragon, but I thought it would look like this. Sadly, it doesn't. It looks like this. Let's wear a lunchbox on our head. I'm sorry. This thing is super ugly. Yes, it's a developer kit, but it looks heavy. Look at that band. You're talking about the cheap ass band. I'm sorry. This for now, maybe I wouldn't have been so what do you want to call it, vocal about this until I saw the price, because I said, wow, let me go ahead and buy one. No. So if you wanted to go out and buy one of these, let's see, I guess I can't actually. Did they take it down already? Interesting. I don't actually see where I can, let's see, here's the development kit. Yeah, wow. It does not look like I have the ability to order it now. Well, okay, so the whole point is they went from, in the previous version, 2 panels to a single 2560 by 1440. If you've got a Pixel, in fact, they don't tell you the size of it, but if you've got a a Pixel phone, you're already seeing a 2560 by 1440. Pretty much any Samsung phone in the past has had this type of resolution, so that's nothing new. The fact is, binaural 3D positional audio, that's nothing new. That can already be done in a phone. What is new, though, is the ability to do smooth motion tracking at 6 degrees of freedom, which is something that I was showing off with the Apple AR, which is only at 30 hertz. And it uses its own integrated DSP to handle that, so the CPU and GPU are not being involved. In fact, my thinking is there's going to be a similar chip inside the headsets that the Windows platform will use. You'll have to have a PC with it. So yes, it's all mobile. These two cameras here will provide the 6 degrees of freedom, so you can move around in an environment without actually having trackers like we have now with the Oculus. Pretty cool, and has fairly large lenses, but God, I don't want to wear a lunchbox on my head. And again, let me see if I can get a price. If I can't, this thing, let's see. Yeah, it's not allowing, maybe they're changing it, or maybe I just can't. Let's see.
They don't have a price on there.
Well, they did. When I first went out there, I could buy it, and they've taken it down since then. Maybe I didn't act. Maybe they've sold out, but essentially $1,800, $1,800 to buy the lunchbox you can wear on your head. I'm baffled. You know, like you can buy a Pixel.
Well, they know people want Snapdragon. They know people want that. So
yeah,
I
right.
mean...
Okay, but the whole point is, even with the 6 degrees of freedom, I know that Occipital will have a product you can OEM, I think for less than $200, to slap on a phone that you can order right now in their development kit and provide the same feature, in fact, I think better, and still be under $1,800. And you know, most headsets that you can buy now that don't have the phones in them are less than $100. So where they came up with 18, I mean, again, it is a development kit.
Who knows?
I don't, you know, I don't have a lot of money. I know a lot of developers don't have a lot of money. To spend a lot of money here is ridiculous. It was one of the reasons I never went with the Microsoft product for the HoloLens, because it was like $3,500. But they're smart. You can now get for less than $300 their mixed reality headset, which I did order immediately. Should be in this month. We'll talk about that later. And but you do need a PC for that. Okay, Chris, since you don't have one, you can jump out at any time, but this is now going to be...
I have one. I have one more. I have one more.
No, you don't. You didn't put it on the list. Okay.
Yeah, I did. It's in there. Okay, I got to run right after this. Yeah, The Void came out with some big news yesterday. Did you hear about this?
I did.
Anybody hear about this? This is on the Void's blog, which the Void obviously making these virtual reality experiences. They've got them open now. The Ghostbusters one's open. They've got one in Salt Lake City. They've got one in New York City. They've got one in Toronto, and they've also got one in Dubai now. So they've got like 4 of these things open, and they just announced yesterday that they are partnering with Disney, who now owns the Star Wars franchise, to go to a galaxy far, far away with the Star Wars Secrets of the Empire, which is like a location-based virtual reality set in Star Wars, and it's called, they're opening them, what's cool is they're opening these voids at downtown Disney, like, so right next to Disneyland is downtown Disney, and then they have another one that's called it's called Disney, it's called Disney Springs, which is like the equivalent next to Walt Disney World in Orlando, Florida. So they're opening 2 of these near each of the Disney franchises in the States. And I'm sure they'll be rolling them out worldwide. But it's supposed to be a whole Star Wars experience. And you don't even have to go to Disneyland. I mean, you go around Disneyland, but you don't have to pay admission to Disneyland. You just pay admission to the Void. And you go and they're going to have these Star Wars experiences. And I don't see when they're planning on opening this. I didn't see, it just says soon. And they recently also announced 3 additions to their C-suite people. I saw they had, so the Void is kind of stepping up. It looks like they're going to be famous or pretty big franchise here pretty soon. I think they're going to grow pretty quick. So the Void, I want to go check one out, man. I want to go out to Salt Lake City and try it out, but I think it's like booked out for months. But maybe one of these days I'll get on and I'll book it out. Maybe see if I can find an opening in the winter and go check it out.
I don't know what's happened to your performance, but it's really kind of gone downhill.
Uh-oh. Well, I'm jumping out.
Okay. Well, don't yet. Let's talk about one more item, then you can jump. And then I'm going to get into some of the tips and tricks on how to use Sansar, but I think I won't be able to do much because it's not even launching on a laptop. So first thing is you got to make sure that you can actually launch it. So maybe you should download the client when you get a chance, and maybe we can talk more about that. And then also what it's going to take to create your own backpack for less than an iPhone, which you're going to miss too. All right, Google Blocks. I haven't covered this yet, but I thought since I covered the previous product, Gravity Sketch, I thought let's talk about this too, and I did a little video as well. It's a fun little product. This one is free, so you can download it for the Oculus or the HTC Vive, and you can pretty much make your own stuff. Now it's kind of has, what's that very blocky game? What the hell's the name of it? Escapes me. Kids are all into it. Come on, Chris, you're not helping me.
I don't know what to say.
Microsoft bought it?
Minecraft.
Thank you. So it has a Minecraft type feeling to it. However, you know, some of these are kind of crude, but there are others that are not. Wow, my whole machine is just, maybe it's this pocket link then. Okay, now I'm back. So essentially there's a lot of models out here that you can try out, and then you can actually go to your own store, make your own, and I made one model. But let me show you this little video real quick, and this is Google Blocks, and here I am
here's
inside
a little demo
Google Blocks.
using Google Blocks, and
So it's kind of very much like Gravity Sketch.
Controllers in front of me. I'm doing this on the
Huh.
That becomes very useful in using Google Blocks. And in my right hand, that's kind of the manipulator. And currently I have a block, but I can adjust this by using the manipulators. So I can select a shape. So as you can see, it has a lot of the primitives that we see in other 3D applications. So let's go with the block. And essentially, we can increase and decrease the size by just moving the joystick back and forth, up and down, making it larger or smaller. And like many applications, essentially you develop your design by using a lot of primitives and then manipulating those primitives. And we're going to go ahead and play with that. So I'm going to go ahead and throw in a block. Boom. And now it exists. Now I can go over here and paint it. So let's do this. We could insert a stroke, but we're going to go ahead and paint it. And notice if I turn it over, I have a palette of devices or colors. So let's go ahead and make it orange. And you have multiple ways of painting, either as a object there, or we can paint just the face. And now let's go back and choose a different color. Let's choose gray. And I'm going to choose this there. And now, as you can see, I have one of the faces on this as gray. Now, to manipulate it, you hold. All right, well, I'll talk over it now. Essentially, I go around and play with it. The best thing is if you have a VR headset, just kind of play it with it yourself. And as you can see here, you can move the objects around. Let me jump ahead a little bit. You can expand it. You can bring in other objects from other people who have created things. You can manipulate the vertices, edges, as well as faces. of the objects. They seem to be a little simpler than Gravity Sketch, but for the most part, you can do a lot of things. What I'm doing there is that I can actually use a plane and then extrude that plane. Let's see, and maybe it comes out here a little later. There you go. And then I can actually import my own models, and I created something like the spacecraft in 2001 and embellished it a little bit. And then you can save them back out and make it part of the library, as you can see back here. And then just add it to it. And obviously you can see a lot of people have been creating things. So it's really fun and free. So if you didn't want to try Gravity Sketch, try this. I know I'm a few weeks late to the game on it, but it's a cool little tool, and pretty much will run on anything that supports this. Okay, so let's kind of move on to the big item. Let me drop this out. I'm getting a lot of issues with my system. I apologize for that. I don't know if it's actually my CPU. Might be Windows itself trying to do something in the background. One more item, if you've got a NVIDIA Shield TV, which I do, you can now support 360 videos right outside of the box. So essentially bring up YouTube, bring a 360 video, and you can rotate in it. It's kind of neat, especially if you've got it on a large screen. Okay, so finally, let's get into what it takes, and then before I get into the Sansar, what it takes in order to do a Sansar upload. But let me find my screen. Okay. So what would it take in order to build a low-cost backpack? Well, one, trying to find a case. I found a lot of the parts, and I'll put a link to a public list of the parts that I'm using, and obviously you can create whatever you want. But here is the box that I decided on. It's basically an empty shell to support a mini ITX case. And I chose, there's only a few motherboards out there, but you need to choose a mini ITX that supports a PCI X 16 channel card, and then be able to find an enclosure that'll be able to support it. The concern I have is that this might be a little too thin for it, but I will find out later and have this built. The other thing is I wanted something that did not have a power supply in it, which this one won't. I'm using a Pico ITX power supply, which allows it to be supported by a 12 volt to 24 volt power supply, which just so happens to work with a lot of lithium 12 volt batteries out there that you can get in multiple sizes, as well as, and I've actually set this up with a cube that I was working with, or not a cube, the Intel Nook type computer that allows you, essentially has, what's a 18 volt output, which is more than adequate for running a lot of the Nooks, which have also a power parameter of 12 volts to 24. And they are like video power packs. Anton Bauer makes some, and then there's a Sony version they call the V-Law. Both of them you can get about $100 for about a 10,000 to 15,000 milliampere per hour battery system. And some of them actually have a connection right off the back of it that you can support through like a $5 or $10 cable, and then power these things. You may have to make your cable, and I'll show you the parts to make one for the Anton Bauer. But for the Sony V-Lock, which is very similar, you can get a cable that has a convenient power cable right off the active with basically unused wires that you can put a coax connector to run directly into these units here, which use, I think, I can't remember, 9mm. No, that's too bit large. Can't remember right now. I think it's 5mm barrel type coax connector. And basically you can power the unit. Now, there are some concerns in doing that. The board that I decided, again, I have all these components that will be in the show notes. I decided to go with a gigabyte board. It was one of the least expensive. And again, the whole object of this is to create a small mini ITX machine for less than $800. So I went with this $80 board that I was able to buy a used version for like $40 or $50. You can buy it, depending, I think, at Newegg for about $60, $70. But it had to have the PCIe 16 or times 16 channel that I talked about, so that we can support an NVIDIA 1050 card in it. The card that I chose was also from Gigabyte, and it was a half height, so it'll, with a riser, a 90-degree riser, I should be able to put it on top. I may have to cut out part of the top here in order for the ventilation system to be exposed in it, but that shouldn't be too much work. Basically, with a Dremel tool or a sheet cutter, I should be able to do that, or maybe model a new cover for it with that cut out and a little more streamlined. This is aluminum, so it's not heavy. But the other cool thing is that it has a VESA adapter for the back of it, so that when I get done with this, I will have a backpack system using a VESA adapter on the back that you just slide it on and it locks into place. Put the battery either on the bottom of the harness or on a belt pack, and essentially hook up the device to it. Now, I've already seen that the HTC Vive, you don't need the extra dongle. You can run it directly into this, which is the plan. And then I will also build a little bit of a wiring harness. Some of these other solutions, the wires seem to be everywhere, so I will build a wire harness so that's a little more organized. So what else is in here? I went with an i3. I didn't go with the Kaby Lake or Copy Lake. I went with the previous version. And the reason I did that is because there's a difference in the power. I think it's like 55, 65 watts for the Kaby Lake version of the chip that I wanted, even in the i3, versus the previous, I can't remember the number, but it was a 65, I can't remember the number, but essentially it's only 35 watts. So in combination with the card, this thing should run for about 90 to 100 watts for about an hour on a battery pack. And so we'll see. I will have this next week up and running. I did try a version with a 4th generation Core i5 and this same card with my HTC Vive, and it worked flawlessly. I ran a few things with it before I converted it into a what do you want to call it, a Mac Mini type clone using the NVIDIA card, which also seems to be working fine. Sadly, there is no content for the Macs yet using the HTC Vive, but the point is it worked. So now I'm going to make and that was actually only using a PCI 4 times channel to 16 times channel, and now I'm going to go with the full 16 times channel. So I'm hoping the performance will be there with the i3. It may not work with all materials, but it should work in what I'm planning to use it for, which is visualization, and also to make it a remote unit. Again, next week I'll have more information on it, and in the show notes this week I'll have a link of all the components. Again, about $800. Now that's not with the battery. You'll be able to make one of these. About $100 for the lithium-ion battery to charge or run it for about an hour. The other thing I'll be doing is either designing or finding a circuit that will check the levels of the battery and send through USB to your device or your little Windows device that the level of the battery is reach a critical moment, and will alert you as well as power you down so that you don't have a hard shutdown. And I did find a circuit. It's about $30 to do that as well. So again, all this will be put together for next week, and I'm looking forward to it. Again, it's only going to be about this size, which compared to my head is not that big, and is only about half the size of my back. Should be much lighter than some of these other packages, even with the battery, and might not look as elegant, but it'll obviously be quite small. And if it works out, big thumbs up for next week. Okay, so let's move on to the next item. As mentioned, I wanted to show you the Sansar system, but I had it working on a couple of machines, and I'll just go ahead and go to the laptop I've been using for VR. And for whatever reason, it has not been functioning. So I have actually Sansar up. As you can see, it's a dark screen. So I don't know why that's the case. I'm a little disappointed with that. I have installed it on a couple of machines. It's worked flawlessly, but it won't get into why it won't work. In fact, if you look for ResLab out on Sansar, if you download the client, you can go ahead and look at the small bathroom I created. But I'm going to go ahead and go through some tips if you're using Blender on what needs to be done in order to produce a model. And let's see if where's my Blender? I don't, I know I have Blender on here. Well, I don't have anything on here. Well, we can actually go out and I can talk you through it. So let's go out to creating content. Let's go to the help. So essentially, the thing that I ran into problems in creating content for Sansar was importing models. And let's see what we have. Here we go, challenges. This is a comment in the community. Creating in Sansar, uploading items, working with 3D objects, object editing. So the path is pretty straightforward. You essentially bring up the upload file, drop in your FBX. It only supports FBX at this time. And then you can actually, before you import, change materials, but I don't suggest that because you can only do it once, have everything all done in Blender. So let's actually type Blender and see where it takes us. Okay, so here's your popular tools. So first of all, to export, this is your setup that needs to be done. I did find that it really didn't matter if you had tangent space selected. It seemed to work regardless. However, it's not that difficult to set it up. If you don't know where this is in Blender, essentially go to Export FBX. This comes down on the bottom left-hand side of your screen. And then you just choose FBX7 binary, your main area, and then you select that. And these are the settings for that. Then down here, all you need to do is select mesh. Some of these other settings, if you wanted to bring in cameras, lamps, and so forth, which if they're always, when you first bring it up, all of them are checked. All you need to do is highlight mesh. Everything else is just as they show here. And then you want to make sure that you select the Phong shader. Again, this only pertains to the specular shading, and I chose not to do that on several of them, and it didn't seem to make a difference. It still brought them in. The thing that was important, and they don't actually show it here. Here we go. This is how you actually set it up. What is important, though, that they don't show you is if you have a model that has a lot of objects, which seem to import OK in Unity as well as Unreal Engine, that it would not be the case here. When I imported some models early on, they would come in, but I couldn't see them. What I learned is that you had to join all the objects to make one object for it to work properly. Once I joined all the objects together, it did bring them in, and with the materials attached to them. And then I just basically brought in my small bathroom, which I baked in shadowing and the textures. But you could go back and make specular mapping, as well as you could bring in normal maps. And then they have a new technique, or not a new, but a technique that's not supported in Blender, but you could get around that, to add noise to the normal mapping in order to create a little bit of texture to kind of give it more detail. So they talk about that. The other thing is creating a collision shape. It doesn't automatically create a collision shape. You need to do that in also your 3D modeling program. And the ones that they show here are only for Blender, Maya and 3D Studio. I have not tried it in anything else. I will try to do that this week and see what else supports it. But it did work finally, and it was fairly easy, and the results look pretty good. As mentioned, you could go out to that video I showed earlier. The results are pretty stunning and do work well. One of the things I did notice, though, and again, I can't show it on this laptop for whatever reason. It doesn't seem to work on all hardware, and that could be the fact is I'm running a laptop. I don't know yet. I will find that out later. It is also a let's see, a beta version of Windows 10 Creative, so that could have been the problem too. Again, I don't know at this point. But the problem I did have is once I published it, or at least exported it so that I could run it in the Sansar universe, I felt the clipping levels were significant. Like I would lose a face on an object, it would just disappear. And if I moved away from it, it would reappear. So it seemed like a clipping system. And I don't know any questions. I'll have to look into that. Again, it could be because my model was fairly complex bringing it in. Maybe I should just export it as a bunch of smaller objects and then see what happens with it. So I'll have to go back with it. I thought maybe it's because I had to scale it up inside the unit. So I went back and scaled it at the proper scale. That didn't seem to help. So I'll have to figure out what the problem there is. But um, as mentioned, I think this could be a pretty cool tool because everything is built into it. It does not have any features that allow you to interact with your objects unless you do some scripting. Unlike Unity, where there's a lot of prefabs, there doesn't seem to be anything like that yet in Sansa. I would assume in the future there will be. There are a few scripts you can work with, and like I said, it does use C#, and I have not worked with that yet. There is some other tools. We talked about SimLabs that you can develop VR for, but the cool thing about Sensa is that it's a ready-made product. You can download the client. Not only can you use this in VR, but you can also use this as a desktop, and it can be used by anybody with the client, and all they need to do is create themselves a little client individual and then jump into any experience, and you just need to create your experiences under your name, and then people can go to them, and then you can communicate with that individual while you're in that environment. So I will do more about that. In fact, I will suggest to Chris to have this running on his system, and then we can be in the same environment. In fact, maybe run the whole show from it. I don't know. Okay, well, that's about it. Let's see what else I have here. Next week, I will cover the Hackintosh VR Mini that I was talking about earlier. If you want to jump into the Mac realm, and I'm really hoping Mac or Apple's out there listening, you've got a device called the Mac Mini that has kind of been wasting away. It's like 4 years old now. I think it's still on a 4th generation processor, or maybe even the 3rd generation iCore. And then it was a laptop component at that. You know, you need to create a product that's lower cost for low-end developers like myself who can't afford one of these iMac Pros for $4,000 or $5,000 because they've invested so much in the Windows market, and build a discrete card into it, either on board or build a slot like I'm doing with this Mini ITX. Otherwise, people like Tony Mack who have a full support system, and it's not that difficult to set up. You're going to eat your lunch from that perspective. Now, keep in mind, it is illegal to download Mac OS if you do not have a machine. I actually had 3 or 4, one that I'm not using, but it still can get the latest version of Mac OS. So I do have a legitimate copy of Mac OS, but the hardware is not there yet. And until they do that, so here's hoping that they'll come out with a Mac Mini, maybe in the $800 price range, with a discrete either onboard or a slot that allows you to plug in a card. I would really love to see that. Crossing fingers that they're moving in that direction. Anyways, I think that's about it. I appreciate you joining us today, and I will see you next week on All Things 3D in Review every Friday around 10:30, maybe 11. I don't know. But for today, I'd like to say goodbye.